Captain Han Taman stood in the observation gallery, his hands gripping the railing so hard his knuckles turned white. Below him, the grand chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with voices from 1,000 different species. Some spoke in clicks, others in musical tones, and many through translation devices that hung in the air like floating lights. He had been coming to this place for 5 years, always hoping that one day the other species would see humans as equals. Today, that hope was about to die. Ambassador Park Hyon stood at the speaker's platform in the center of the massive room. The elderly diplomat's face was calm, but Taman could see the tension in his shoulders. Park had given everything to this moment, spending decades trying to prove that humanity deserved its place among the stars. Next to Taman, Dr. Yoon Ji-won watched with sad eyes. She had worked so hard to build bridges between humans and aliens, studying their cultures, learning their languages, and showing them that humans were more than the violent primitives they believed us to be. The vote was already decided. Everyone knew it. The Galactic Council had made up its mind months ago, and this was just a formality. Still, they had to go through with it, had to pretend that democracy and justice meant something here. Council Overseer Velthar rose from her crystal throne. She was a being of pure light contained in a crystalline shell, and when she spoke, her voice echoed through every translation device in the room. The motion has been called. All species will now cast their vote on the expulsion of humanity from the Galactic Council and all civilized space. The charges are excessive aggression, refusal to abandon military research, and dangerous individualism that threatens the harmony of our union. Taman felt his jaw clench. Excessive aggression. They called it that when humans refused to be pushed around. When pirates attacked human colonies and humans fought back, that was aggression. When humans built ships capable of defending themselves, that was threatening. And individualism? That was just another word for not thinking exactly like everyone else. The voting began. One by one, species cast their votes on the holographic display. Red lights appeared for each vote to expel humanity. Taman watched as the count climbed. 10 votes, 50 votes, 200 votes. The red light spread across the display like a disease. A few species abstained, their votes showing as yellow, but not a single green light appeared. Not one species voted to let humanity stay. Dr. Yoon Ji-won whispered beside him. They're afraid of us. That's what this really is. We've advanced too fast, learned too quickly. In 200 years, we've matched technology that took them thousands of years to develop. She was right, and Taman knew it. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council as the newest and least advanced species. The Council had expected humans to spend centuries slowly catching up, always remaining grateful and subservient to their betters. Instead, humans had absorbed knowledge like sponges, improved on alien technology, and created innovations that made the elder species uncomfortable. Humans asked questions no one else asked. Humans took risks no one else would take. And worst of all, humans refused to give up their military fleets even when the Council demanded it. The final count appeared on the display. 847 votes to expel humanity. 1 abstention. 0 votes to let them stay. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Council Overseer Velthar spoke again, her crystalline form glowing brighter. The vote is concluded. Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. All human presence must be withdrawn from Council space within 10 standard years. All treaties are void. All trade agreements are cancelled. Humanity will return to their own systems and remain there. This is the will of the Council. Ambassador Park Hyon stood silent for a long moment. Then he took a deep breath and spoke into his translator. His voice was steady, but Taman could hear the anger beneath it. You make a mistake today. You cast us out because you fear what we might become. You call us aggressive, but we have only ever defended ourselves. You call us dangerous, but we have never started a war with any of you. You say we threaten your harmony, but what you really mean is that we threaten your control. The chamber fell silent. No one interrupted a final statement, even from a species being expelled. Park continued. We will leave as you demand. We will take our ships, our people, and our ideas back to our own space. But remember this day. Remember that when you needed someone to think differently, to solve problems in new ways, to push the boundaries of what's possible, you chose fear instead of friendship. You chose stagnation instead of growth, and one day you will regret this choice, not because we will seek revenge, but because when you finally need us, We may not be there to answer." With that, Ambassador Park Hyon bowed once, a gesture of respect that none of the council members returned, and walked out of the chamber. Taemin and Dr. Yoon Ji-won followed him, along with the rest of the human delegation. Behind them, the alien species began to chatter and celebrate, relieved that the troublesome humans were finally being dealt with. General Kang Min-ho waited for them outside the chamber. The military commander's face was like stone. "I've already given the orders," he said quietly. "All human ships are beginning withdrawal procedures. We'll be out of council space within the required time." Ambassador Park nodded slowly. "What happens now?" General Kang's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Now we go home. We close our borders, and we make sure that we never need them again." They think they've seen human innovation. They haven't seen anything yet. Without their restrictions, without their rules about what technology we can develop, without their constant demands that we slow down and wait for everyone else, we're going to show them what humanity can really do. Dr. Yoon Ji-won looked back at the council chamber one last time. They destroyed 10 years of my research, confiscated everything I'd learned about alien biology and cultural exchange. They said it was too dangerous for humans to have that knowledge. "Then we'll learn it again," Taemin said. "We'll learn it better. And we'll do it on our own terms." The human delegation walked through the corridors of the council station for the last time. Alien species moved aside as they passed, some looking relieved, others looking almost sad. A few younger aliens watched with curious eyes as if wondering whether this was really the right choice. Within weeks, human ships began their journey home. Colonies were evacuated. Trade posts were dismantled. Embassies were closed. Humanity withdrew from galactic society completely, leaving behind only empty stations and memories. The Galactic Council watched them go and felt satisfied that they had protected their way of life from the dangerous, unpredictable humans. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. 50 years had passed since the banishment, and the galaxy had almost forgotten about humanity. The Terran Exclusion Zone, as it was now called, had become a mystery wrapped in silence. No ships entered. No messages came out. The Galactic Council occasionally sent probe ships to the border, but they always returned with the same report. Nothing. Just empty space and automated warning buoys that politely but firmly told all visitors to turn around. Admiral Lee Doyen stood on the bridge of the defense station Barrier 7, watching those probe ships turn away. He was born 3 years after the expulsion, part of a generation that had never known the Galactic Council except through history lessons and old videos. To him, the Council wasn't something to miss or long for. It was simply a fact of history. Like ancient wars or old governments, his loyalty was to humanity alone, and he had spent his entire career making sure humanity would never be vulnerable again. "Another probe," reported the sensor officer. "Lumini design, same as last month. It's scanning the border and transmitting data back to Council space." "Let it look," Admiral Lee said calmly. "Let them wonder what we're doing out here." What humanity was doing would have shocked the Council if they knew. Without the restrictions, without the demands to slow down and conform, without the constant pressure to make their technology compatible with outdated alien systems, human innovation had exploded. It wasn't just advancement. It was a complete transformation of everything humans thought was possible. Chief Engineer Choi Sora walked onto the bridge carrying a data pad. She was young, only 30 years old, but already recognized as one of humanity's greatest minds. "Admiral, the Phoenix Initiative is ahead of schedule. We'll have the first squadron ready for trials within 6 months. Admiral Lee nodded. The Phoenix Initiative was humanity's greatest secret, a project so classified that even most human governments didn't know the full details. It had started 20 years ago with a simple question. What if ships didn't have to travel through normal space at all? What if they could phase between dimensions, appearing and disappearing at will? The Council had declared such research impossible and dangerous. Humanity had made it work. "And the mining stations?" Admiral Lee asked. "Exceeding projections," Choi Sora replied with a small smile. "The self-replicating design is working perfectly. They consume asteroids, extract resources, and build copies of themselves. We've gone from 50 stations to over 3,000 in the last 5 years. Raw materials are no longer a limiting factor for any project. Across human space, similar miracles were happening. Dr. Kim Yoonji had cracked faster-than-light communication without relay stations, meaning human ships could talk to each other instantly across any distance. Human colonies had spread to star systems the Council had declared uninhabitable, using technology to adapt hostile environments rather than searching for perfect Earth-like worlds. Manufacturing had become almost entirely automated, with artificial intelligence handling the complex work while humans focused on design and innovation. The younger generation, people like An Junho, had grown up in this new reality. Junho was 25, a pilot training for the Phoenix Initiative. He sat in a simulation pod, his mind directly connected to a virtual ship through neural interface technology. The simulation threw impossible scenarios at him. Enemy ships appearing from nowhere, weapons that bent the laws of physics, situations that would kill any normal pilot. Junho handled them with ease, his reflexes enhanced by genetic improvements and his mind sharpened by a lifetime of advanced education. When the simulation ended, Junho's instructor reviewed the results. 4 minutes 17 seconds. That's a new record. You eliminated all targets without taking a single hit. Junho shrugged. The simulation is getting easier. I need harder challenges. His instructor laughed. You sound like every human I know. Always pushing, always wanting more. The Council called it dangerous individualism. We call it progress. That attitude defined humanity now. Where the Council species had grown comfortable and complacent with their technology, humans constantly pushed boundaries. Where aliens saw limits, humans saw challenges to overcome. It wasn't that humans were naturally superior. It was that they had been forced to become self-reliant, and in doing so, they had discovered what they were truly capable of. The merchants of Velgarn, a group of smugglers who occasionally traded with humans at the border, brought interesting news. They would arrive in small ships trading exotic goods from Council space for human technology. Admiral Lee didn't officially approve of these meetings, but he didn't stop them either. The information they provided was valuable. One such merchant, an insectoid creature named Tikthar, met with human traders at a neutral station. Your technology, Tikthar said through his translator, his mandibles clicking nervously. It's beyond anything in Council space. These communication devices, these power cells, this metallurgy. Where did you get these designs? The human trader, a woman named Song Mirai, smiled. We made them. We've had 50 years without anyone telling us what we can't do. Tikthar's compound eyes reflected confusion, but the Council has thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. How can you advance so fast? Because we had to, Song Mirai replied. Because you left us alone and we learned to survive. And because we're not afraid to fail. How many new technologies has the Council developed in the last 50 years? Tikthar thought about it. Few, perhaps none that are truly revolutionary. The Council perfected most technology millennia ago. Why change what already works? That's why, Song Mirai said simply. You stopped trying. We never did. The smuggler left with his trade goods, shaking his head at the strange humans. He would take his goods back to Council space and sell them for enormous profits. And he would tell other merchants about the mysterious humans who had somehow leaped ahead of civilizations 10 times older than they were. Back at Barrier 7, Admiral Lee Doyen received reports from across human space. Every report showed the same thing. Growth, advancement, success. Human space now covered more star systems than they had controlled before the banishment. The population had tripled. Industry had expanded exponentially. And the military, the very thing the Council had feared, had become something that would make the old alien empires tremble. Chief Engineer Choi Sora brought him another report, this one marked with high-security codes. Admiral, the first phase ship completed its test. It worked perfectly. The ship phased out of normal space, traveled 50 light-years, and phased back in. Total time, 12 seconds. No damage, no side effects. We can move ships anywhere without anyone seeing them coming. Admiral Lee allowed himself a rare smile. How long until we have a fleet? If we dedicate resources. 5 years for 100 ships, 10 years for 1,000. Do it, Admiral Lee ordered. The Council wanted us to remain weak and dependent. Instead, we've become strong and self-sufficient. I don't know if we'll ever interact with them again, but if we do, it will be as equals or not at all. An Junho and his fellow pilots continued training, pushing their skills to levels that seemed superhuman. Human scientists continued their research, making breakthrough after breakthrough without ethical committees from a dozen species arguing about every experiment. Human engineers built wonders, from habitats that could survive, in the hearts of gas giants to ships that could travel, Between stars and seconds 50. Years of isolation had transformed humanity from a rejected younger species into something the galaxy had never seen before. They were united by their shared experience of rejection. They were driven by the need to prove they didn't need anyone else. And they were free to innovate without limits. The Galactic Council, comfortable in their ancient ways, continued their peaceful existence. They had forgotten about humanity, dismissed them as a failed experiment in bringing primitives into civilized space. They believed their decision had been correct, that they had protected themselves from a dangerous and unpredictable species. They had no idea that in their isolation, humanity had become something far more dangerous than the Council had ever feared. Not because humans were aggressive or violent, but because they had become unstoppable. The warning came from the galactic rim, from the empty space between galaxies where nothing was supposed to exist. A Council science station picked up strange readings, energy signatures that didn't match anything in their databases. They sent a scout ship to investigate. The scout ship never returned. Neither did the next 3 ships they sent. By the time the Council realized something was wrong, it was already too late. The swarm had arrived. They came like a plague, billions of organic ships that moved as one mind. Each ship was a living creature, grown rather than built, with armor made of hardened bone and weapons that fired streams of acid and bioplasma. They didn't communicate, didn't negotiate, didn't demand anything. They simply consumed. Every planet they reached was stripped of all biological matter within days. Plants, animals, even bacteria. Everything was absorbed into the swarm to create more ships, more weapons, more death. Council Overseer Relamara watched the reports with growing horror. She was the current leader of the Council, a position she had held for 30 years. In all that time, the Council had faced no serious threats. There had been small conflicts, trade disputes, minor territorial disagreements, but nothing like this. Nothing that threatened the very existence of civilized space. "How many ships do we have at the front line?" she asked her military advisor, a 4-armed being from the Corthan species. 2,000 warships, Overseer. "We've called up reserves from 15 systems. It should be more than enough to stop this incursion." It wasn't enough, not even close. The first battle was a massacre. Council ships, designed more for show than for actual combat, fired their weapons at the swarm. The bioships absorbed the damage, their organic hulls healing almost as fast as they were wounded. Then the swarm fired back and Council ships began to die. Their shields failed under the acid attacks. Their hulls melted. Their crews were consumed. Of the 2,000 ships that went to battle, fewer than 300 returned. The survivors told stories of an enemy that couldn't be stopped, that adapted to every weapon used against it, that moved with perfect coordination across millions of ships. The swarm didn't just fight. It learned, evolved, and improved with every battle. Captain Bay Yuna watched the battle from a distance, her stealth ship Horizon's Edge hidden at the edge of the system. She was human, one of the scouts that Admiral Lee Doyen sent to monitor the borders between human and Council space. Her ship was equipped with technology the Council didn't know existed. Sensors so advanced they could track individual ships across light years, and a cloaking system that made her completely invisible. "Are you recording this?" asked her communications officer, Park Sujin. Sujin was the daughter of the former ambassador who had been expelled 51 years ago. She had grown up hearing stories of the Council's betrayal, and now she watched them suffer with cold eyes. "Every second," Bayuna confirmed. "Command needs to see this. The Council is losing badly. Their weapons are outdated, their tactics are predictable, and their ships are too slow to maneuver against the swarm." They watched as another Council fleet arrived to reinforce the survivors. This fleet was larger, over 5,000 ships, and included some of the Council's oldest and most powerful warships. Ships that were 1,000 years old, preserved and maintained as symbols of the Council's might. The fleet looked impressive, a wall of metal and energy that filled the space around the besieged colony world. The swarm tore through them like they were made of paper. Within hours, the second fleet was scattered, burning wreckage floating through space. The colony world below was consumed, billions of aliens dying as the swarm descended from orbit. Within 3 days, the planet was a dead husk, stripped of every living thing. The swarm ships that had been wounded in the battle consumed the biomass from the planet and healed themselves, emerging stronger than before. "They're growing," Park Sujin whispered, her face pale. "Every world they take makes them stronger. Every battle they win gives them more resources. Bayuna sent the data back to human space through the instant communication system, then moved her ship to follow the swarm. Over the next weeks, she watched them consume world after world. The Council threw everything they had at the swarm. Ancient weapons that hadn't been used in millennia. Experimental technology that had been deemed too dangerous to deploy. Suicide attacks where ships rammed into swarm vessels. Nothing worked. The swarm adapted to everything, learned from everything, and continued its advance. In the council chambers, panic had replaced the usual calm deliberation. Council Overseer Relmara listened to report after report of losses. 50 worlds consumed, 100 million dead, fleet after fleet destroyed. The military advisors gave their estimates, and the numbers were terrifying. At the current rate of advance, the swarm would reach the Council's core worlds within 3 years. Within 5 years, every major civilization in Council space would be extinct. We need new strategies, one advisor insisted. New weapons, new tactics, and from where? Another responded bitterly. Our technology hasn't significantly advanced in 5 centuries. We don't know how to innovate anymore. We've spent so long perfecting what we have that we've forgotten how to create something new. That's when someone mentioned humanity. It was a junior advisor, young enough that the banishment was just history to her. What about the humans? They were always creating new things, new ideas. They were expelled because they advanced too quickly. Maybe they could help. The chamber fell silent. The idea was almost unthinkable. Humanity had been cast out in disgrace. To ask them for help now would be admitting that the Council had been wrong, that their fears had been foolish, that they needed the very species they had rejected. Council Overseer Relmara felt the weight of her position. She could order more fleets to their deaths, could watch her civilization die in pride, or she could do the unthinkable. She could ask humanity to save them. What do we know about humanity's current status? She asked quietly. An intelligence officer brought up what little data they had. Very little, Overseer. They withdrew into their own space 51 years ago and have maintained complete isolation. We send probe ships occasionally, but they're always turned away at the border. Smuggler reports suggest human technology has advanced significantly, but we have no concrete data. Send a message, Relmara ordered, to the human border. Request a meeting. Tell them we need to discuss a threat to all species in the galaxy. The message was sent, transmitted through old communication channels that hadn't been used in half a century. For 3 days, there was no response. The Council waited, watching as the swarm consumed 2 more worlds. Then finally a response came. It was brief, just a set of coordinates and a time. A neutral space station called Haven's Gate, at the border between human and Council space. Ambassador O. Minseo received the Council delegation. He was humanity's diplomatic observer, a position that technically existed but had no real duties, since humanity had no formal relations with anyone. He was a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. When the Council delegation arrived, he greeted them politely but without warmth. The Council representatives were led by Council Overseer Relmara herself, along with 2 military advisors and a diplomatic aide. They looked tired, frightened, desperate. When they saw the human station, they stopped in shock. The technology was beyond anything they'd seen before. Energy signatures they couldn't identify. Hull materials they couldn't classify. Even the docking procedures were advanced beyond their understanding. Ambassador O, Relmara began, her voice shaking slightly. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. You came a long way, O Minseo replied neutrally. What do you want? Relmara took a deep breath. We need your help. There's a threat, an extragalactic species we call the Swarm. They're consuming everything in their path. We've lost hundreds of worlds, billions of lives. Our fleets can't stop them. Our technology isn't enough. We're requesting humanity's assistance. O Minseo looked at her for a long moment. You want us to save you. The same council that expelled us, that called us dangerous and aggressive, that took 51 years to even speak to us again. You want us to risk human lives for your civilization. Yes, Relmara said simply. We were wrong. About everything. We punished you because we were afraid of change, afraid that you would challenge our comfortable existence. And now that comfort has made us weak. We're asking for help because billions will die if we don't get it. Not just council species. The swarm won't stop at our borders. Eventually, they'll reach human space too. Ambassador O stood and walked to a window looking out at the stars. I'll transmit your request to Earth, but I can't promise anything. You made your choice 51 years ago. Now humanity will make its choice. The debate raged across human space for weeks. Every government, every colony, every station held discussions about what to do. The question wasn't simple. Should humanity help the civilization that had cast them out? Should they risk human lives to save aliens who had treated them with nothing but contempt? The arguments were passionate on both sides. General Nam Seojin stood before the Unified Earth Council, his face hard with anger. He was old enough to remember the banishment, had been a young officer watching as humanity retreated in shame. They abandoned us when we needed acceptance. They destroyed our research, confiscated our technology, and told us we weren't worthy of standing beside them. Now they're losing a war and suddenly we're good enough? Let them burn. Let them face the consequences of their arrogance. His words found support among many humans. Why should they care about the council? Humanity had survived alone, had thrived alone. They owed these aliens nothing. If the council had grown weak and comfortable, that was their problem to solve. But there were other voices. Jang Hyun, the chief political advisor to Earth's government, spoke next. She was younger, born after the banishment with no personal anger toward the council. I understand the desire for revenge. Believe me, I do. But if we let genocide happen when we have the power to prevent it, what does that make us? The council called us aggressive and dangerous. If we stand by and watch billions die just to prove a point, maybe they were right about us. Admiral Lee Doyen listened to both arguments from his position on the council. He commanded humanity's military forces and would be the one to send ships into battle if humanity decided to help. The decision weighed heavily on him. He thought about his parents who had worked on colony ships during the banishment. He thought about his generation, who had grown up knowing they were rejected. He thought about the younger generation, who had never known anything but human independence. There's a practical consideration, he said finally. The swarm won't stop at council borders. Captain Bayuna's reports are clear. This is an extragalactic invasion, and they're consuming everything biological. If we let them destroy the council, they'll turn toward human space next. We'd be fighting them alone, across a much wider front with no allies. Better to stop them now, while the council can still serve as a buffer, than to face them alone later. The council overseer Relmara waited at Haven's Gate Station, watching the days pass. She had remained there with her delegation, hoping for an answer. Ambassador Oh Min-seo had been polite but distant, providing quarters and supplies but nothing more. She spent her time reviewing the latest reports from council space. 2 more worlds lost, fleet casualties approaching 60%. The swarm was accelerating its advance. On the 7th day, Admiral Lee Doyen arrived at the station. His ship appeared without warning, phasing into existence near the docking ports. The council delegation jumped in surprise. They had seen no hyperspace signature, no energy buildup, no warning at all. The ship had simply appeared as if materializing from nothing. Relmara and her advisors met with the Admiral in a conference room. They were shocked by how young he looked. The Admiral who commanded humanity's military forces was barely 50 years old, young by the standards of most council species. But his eyes held a depth that came from responsibility, not age. We've reviewed your situation, Admiral Lee began without preamble. The swarm is a legitimate threat. Our analysis confirms that they won't stop at council borders. Eventually they'll reach human space, then you'll help? Relmara asked hopefully. We're still deciding, Admiral Lee replied. But first I need you to understand something. If humanity agrees to intervene, it won't be as your subordinates. It won't be us begging to rejoin the council. It will be as an independent power offering assistance to an ally. We'll fight under our own command, using our own tactics, and you won't question our methods. One of the council military advisors bristled at this. You expect us to give humans free rein in council space? To let you operate without oversight? Admiral Lee's expression didn't change. Yes, because your oversight, your regulations, your careful committee decisions are why you're losing. We don't fight wars by consensus. We fight to win. Relmara silenced her advisor with a gesture. If you help us, we'll agree to whatever terms you require. We're offering full restoration of council membership. Reparations for the expulsion, territory, resources, whatever you want. Just please help us. We don't want council membership, Admiral Lee said flatly. We don't want your territory or your resources. If we do this, it's because it's the right thing to do and because it protects humanity's interests. That's all. The council delegation looked confused. They had expected demands, negotiations, revenge. Instead, they got a simple statement of purpose. It was almost more frightening than anger would have been. "I'd like to show you something," Admiral Lee said. He activated a holographic display showing a military exercise. A single human ship appeared on the screen, facing a formation of 50 ships that looked like council designs. The council advisors leaned forward, watching carefully. The human ship phased out of existence, then reappeared inside the formation. It fired weapons that seemed to bend space itself, disabling 10 ships in seconds. Then it phased again, appearing behind another group. Within 3 minutes, all 50 ships were disabled. Their systems offline, but their crews safe. The human ship hadn't taken a single hit. "That's impossible," one of the military advisors whispered. "How did it move like that? Those weapons, that speed, that precision, we have nothing like that." "We know," Admiral Lee said. "We've had 51 years without your restrictions. 51 years to develop technology you said was impossible or too dangerous. 51 years to prepare for threats you didn't believe existed. That's what humanity can bring to this war." The council delegation watched the recording in stunned silence. They had expected humans to be advanced, but this was beyond their imagination. This was technology that made their ancient, proud civilization look primitive. "The council thought we were dangerous because we wouldn't disarm," Admiral Lee continued. "You were right. We are dangerous, but not to our allies. Only to our enemies. If we enter this war, the swarm will learn what it means to face an enemy that doesn't give up, doesn't surrender, and doesn't stop until the threat is eliminated." Relmara felt tears forming in her crystalline eyes. "We were such fools. We punished you for being strong. We cast you out for refusing to be weak. And now you're our only hope." "You weren't ready for us," Admiral Lee said, his voice softer now. "Your civilization had achieved peace and prosperity by making everyone the same. Everyone had to follow the same rules, use the same technology, think the same way. Humanity didn't fit that model. We're too diverse, too competitive, too willing to take risks. You saw that as a threat. Maybe it was, but maybe that's exactly what you need now." The Admiral stood up. "I'm returning to human space. The decision will be made within 48 hours. If we agree to help, we'll send a fleet to your coordinates. If you don't hear from us, it means we've chosen to defend our own borders and let you face the swarm alone. Either way, this meeting is over." He left the room, leaving the council delegation sitting in silence. Relmara looked at her advisors, seeing the same shock and fear in their faces that she felt. They had come begging for help and had been shown just how far behind they had fallen. The humans had moved beyond them in every way that mattered. Back on his ship, Admiral Lee Doyen contacted Earth. "I've seen their situation firsthand. It's bad. The swarm is real, it's growing, and it will reach our space within a decade if we don't stop it. I recommend we intervene. Not for the Council. For ourselves." The response came 12 hours later. The Unified Earth Council had voted. It had been close, the debate fierce, but in the end, humanity had made its choice. They would fight. Not because they forgave the Council, not because they wanted to rejoin galactic civilization, but because humanity had learned something the Council had forgotten. Sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. And sometimes you have to save people who don't deserve it, simply because you're capable of doing so and they're not. The Terran intervention fleet arrived without warning. One moment, the Council forces defending the besieged world of Kelthera were alone, watching helplessly as swarm ships descended toward the planet. The next moment, space itself seemed to tear open and 100 human ships phased into existence, appearing in perfect formation between the planet and the swarm. Admiral Lee Doyen stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Indomitable. Around him, officers worked with calm efficiency, their movements practiced and precise. He opened a communication channel that broadcast to both the Council ships and the approaching swarm, though he knew the swarm wouldn't respond. "This is Admiral Lee Doyen of the Terran Defense Force. To the Council ships, stand down and maintain defensive positions around the planet. We'll handle the swarm. To the swarm, if you can understand this, you've made a mistake coming here. This is your only warning. Leave this system now." The swarm, of course, didn't leave. The bioships altered course, turning their attention to this new threat. Thousands of organic vessels, each one the size of a skyscraper, moved as one mind toward the human fleet. They had destroyed every Council fleet they'd encountered. These humans would be no different. They were very different. The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for generations. Captain An Junho sat in the cockpit of his phase fighter, his mind connected directly to the ship through neural interface. He had trained for this moment his entire adult life. Around him, his squadron of 50 fighters launched from the Indomitable, accelerating to speeds that would have torn apart any council ship. The fighters phased in and out of normal space, becoming impossible targets. 1 second they were here, the next they were gone, reappearing somewhere else entirely. Junho selected his first target, a massive swarm bioship that was launching acid projectiles at a council cruiser. He phased his fighter, appearing inside the swarm ship's formation, and fired. His weapons weren't conventional lasers or missiles. They were quantum destabilizers, technology that attacked matter at the molecular level. The swarm ship's organic armor, which had withstood every council weapon, simply fell apart. The bioship collapsed in on itself, dying in seconds. "Target destroyed," Junho reported calmly. "Moving to next target." His squadron followed his lead, phasing through the swarm formation like ghosts. 50 fighters destroyed 200 swarm ships in the first 5 minutes of combat. The swarm adapted, trying to predict where the fighters would appear, but human pilots were too fast, too unpredictable. They didn't follow patterns. Each pilot made independent decisions, creating chaos that the hive mind couldn't counter. Dr. Lim Soyan watched the battle from the Indomitable's science bay. She was a xenobiologist who had spent the last 2 weeks studying every piece of data about the swarm. She had found something, a weakness in how the bioships communicated with each other. They used a quantum entanglement network which made their coordination perfect, but also created a vulnerability. "Admiral," she called to the bridge, "I've found it. The swarm ships communicate through quantum frequencies. If we can generate the right interference pattern, we can disrupt their coordination. They'll start fighting as individual ships instead of one mind." "How long to develop a weapon?" Admiral Lee asked. 4 hours if we prioritize resources." "Do it. We'll keep them busy." The human fleet engaged the swarm with tactics the Council had never imagined. Ships phased in and out of existence, appearing behind swarm formations and disappearing before the bioships could respond. Human weapons developed without Council restrictions tore through organic armor. Railguns firing projectiles at relativistic speeds punched through multiple ships at once. Energy weapons that manipulated gravity crushed bioships like insects. Nanite swarms that consumed organic matter faster than the swarm could regenerate. But the battle wasn't one-sided. The swarm had numbers on its side, and they were learning. Bioships began to anticipate the phase jumps, positioning themselves to ambush human ships when they materialized. Acid weapons found their marks, melting through even advanced human armor. The Indomitable took multiple hits, its shields flaring bright as they absorbed damage that would have destroyed any Council ship. Marine Commander Jong Siwoo led his team in the most dangerous part of the operation. They boarded a swarm bioship, their powered armor protecting them from the toxic atmosphere inside. The interior of the ship was like being inside a living creature, all pulsing flesh and organic systems. Swarm creatures emerged from the walls, chitinous monsters with razor claws and acid spit. Jung's team fought hand-to-hand in the cramped corridors, their armor enhancing their strength to superhuman levels. They moved with precision, covering each other, taking down swarm creatures with weapons designed specifically for close combat. Their objective was the ship's core, the central nerve cluster that controlled the vessel. If they could destroy it, the entire bioship would die. "Approaching core," Jung reported. "Heavy resistance. We need 2 more minutes." "You have 1 minute," Admiral Lee responded. "We're taking too much damage. Either disable that ship now or evacuate." Jung and his team pushed forward, fighting through waves of swarm creatures. They reached the core, a massive pulsing organ that glowed with bioluminescent light. Jung placed the charges himself, setting them for maximum yield. "Charges placed. Evacuating now." The team ran back through the dying ship, the organic walls convulsing around them. They reached their dropship just as the charges detonated. The entire bioship exploded from within, consumed by fire that spread faster than its regeneration could heal. It was the first time anyone had successfully boarded and destroyed a swarm ship from the inside. After 4 hours of continuous combat, Dr. Lim Soyan completed her work. The quantum interference weapon was ready. Admiral Lee gave the order, and the Indomitable fired a new type of weapon, one that didn't destroy ships but disrupted the invisible network that connected them. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The swarm ships, which had been moving with perfect coordination, suddenly began to act independently, They collided with each other, fired at friendly ships, broke formation. Without the hive mind directing them, they were just animals, dangerous but no longer unstoppable. The human fleet pressed the advantage. Phase ships appeared throughout the swarm formation, targeting the now confused bioships with devastating precision. Council ships, which had been barely holding their defensive positions, saw their opportunity and joined the attack. Together, human and council forces pushed the swarm back. The bioships began to retreat, fleeing the system in disorder. Council Overseer Relmara watched from a council command ship, tears streaming down her crystalline face. She had witnessed the impossible. A human fleet outnumbered 5-1 had broken a swarm attack that would have consumed an entire world. They had done it with technology and tactics that seemed like magic, with courage that bordered on insanity, and with efficiency that spoke of absolute professionalism. "Follow them," Admiral Lee ordered his fleet. "We're not just defending. We're pushing them back. Every world they've taken, every system they've consumed, we're taking it back." The campaign lasted 6 months. The Terran intervention fleet moved from system to system, engaging the swarm wherever they found them. Captain An Junho and his squadron became legends, their kill counts exceeding anything achieved in human history. Dr. Lim Soyan refined her quantum weapon, making it more effective with each battle. Marine Commander Zhang Siwu led boarding action after boarding action, destroying bioships from within. The turning point came at the swarm's main hive, a massive cluster of bioships that served as their central intelligence. Admiral Li Doyen led the fleet straight into the heart of the hive, ignoring the protest from Council military advisors who said it was suicide. Human ships phased through the outer defenses, appearing deep inside the formation where the Swarm Queen resided. The final battle was brutal. Swarm ships threw everything they had at the human fleet. The Indomitable's shields failed, and the ship took direct hits to its hull. Dozens of human ships were destroyed, thousands of lives lost. But the fleet pushed forward, fighting through the defensive layers until they reached the Queen herself. She was massive. A bioship the size of a small moon, pulsing with the combined intelligence of the entire swarm. Dr. Lim Soyan fired her quantum weapon directly into the Queen's core. The effect rippled through the entire hive, disrupting the connections that held the swarm together. The Queen convulsed, her massive body tearing itself apart as the quantum interference destroyed her from within. With the Queen dead, the swarm collapsed. Bioships throughout the galaxy lost their coordination, becoming nothing more than mindless creatures. Some fled back toward the galactic rim. Others died where they floated, their organic systems failing without the hive mind to sustain them. The threat was over. The cost had been high. Humanity had lost 37 ships and over 15,000 lives. The Council had lost hundreds of worlds and billions of people, but they had survived. The swarm had been defeated, driven back by the very species the Council had rejected as too dangerous. Admiral Li Doyen met with Council Overseer Relmara one final time, on a Council world that was rebuilding after the swarm's attack.